The race between the vaccine and the variants, and the legacy of Ohio's so-called 34th senator. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Michael Miller, former Franklin County prosecutor, Morgan Harper, progressive activist, and Andy Chow, State House reporter for Ohio Public Radio. By the end of this month, every Ohioan old enough to drive will be eligible to get a COVID-19 vaccine. The state revealed its latest vaccination plan as more and more doses become available in Ohio. By the end of March, the state hopes to administer 500,000 shots a week, and that's just in time. In the past week or so, new cases and hospitalizations have plateaued after declining rapidly for several weeks.
Frankly, in a race, and we don't really know exactly what the enemy is doing, but we do know from talking to the scientists and talking to epidemiologists that they do believe that the variant is spreading in Ohio. The good news is that the vaccine is appears to be just as powerful, they think, against the variant as against what we're dealing with before. But also, the downside of that, of course, is that it is believed to be a lot more contagious.
Andy Chow, now everyone can get a shot by March 29th. Is that because we're suddenly getting a bunch new of orders of vaccines, or are we just getting better at distributing them and handing them out?
I think it's a little bit of a couple of things, Mike. Yes, we are seeing a big increase in the amount of vaccine that the states are going to get. And like you said, we're expecting to see about 500,000 doses a week coming into the state by the end of the month. The groups that have been eligible for the vaccine have had a certain amount of time to go get that shot. And what we've been hearing and what the state's been hearing from vaccine providers is that they're running into a situation where they're trying to provide it to as many people as possible within the eligibility groups. And then they're still finding themselves with a surplus of vaccine at the end of the week. And you hear about, especially in rural areas and small towns around Ohio, that they have these no waste lists to make sure that the vaccine doesn't expire. And it seems like they're turning to those lists more and more often. And so this broadening of the vaccine, this broadening of qualifications and eligibility to the vaccine is part of several of those factors.
Michael Miller, you've had the vaccine now, the second shot even, for quite a while. This is obviously good news, and it's, the more people get the shot, we believe, the quicker this thing gets behind us.
Well, I think that's right. And I think there's another thing too, Mike. There's these people who, for unknown reasons to me anyway, say they're not going to get the shot. I suppose they have various and sundry reasons for it. I think the more people that do get the shot, they then become conversant with the ones that don't want to do it. I think a neighbor A who's not going to get the shot sees neighbor B get it, sees neighbor C get it, has faith in them, and then I think hopefully neighbor A changes his mind, goes out and get it done. So I think it's going to have a twofold effect, and I think it's really going to be good for the state.
Mike, you've never been in the Trump camp throughout the past 4 or 5 years, but a poll out this week, it was an NPR poll that showed that a majority of Republicans, and especially those who supported Donald Trump, weren't going to get the vaccine. What do you think is going on there? Is it just sort of political hard-headedness, or is there a legitimate concern about the newness of the vaccine?
Well, Mike, I've been a Republican my whole life, but I was never in the Trump thing, as I think you know. I have no idea why they're not doing it. I mean, I could guess, and it's just beyond common sense to me. Science is not Republican or Democrat. It's simply here it is, and it seems to me that science is overwhelming that we should take these shots. And why they're not doing it, you'll have to ask them.
Morgan Harper, African Americans, because of history, often are leery of medical procedures and unproven medical devices, unproven medicines. What is the feeling now that we have been giving the vaccine out now really since Christmas? It's now, we're approaching Easter. Is the feeling changed there? Are more and more folks in the African American community willing to give the vaccine a shot, or people of color getting the vaccine?
I mean, it seems like that's what the data is showing, that actually, when polled, a majority of Black people say that they are going to get vaccinated. And so, I think if we're really going to achieve herd immunity and have widespread vaccination, we are going to have to address some of the populations that you all were just discussing that are more distrustful. And I don't think it's necessarily the Black community. I think it's through a lot of misinformation that's spread about the vaccine that leaders like the former president and some of the leaders within our own state don't do enough to counter. And I would love to see, instead of $50 million spent on recruiting people from the East Coast into believing that we're leading on something, we actually just lead and get more people vaccinated and cut through a lot of that misinformation.
Andy Chow, the governor, talked about how we're in a race. These variants, we're not quite sure exactly how the vaccine will treat these variants. We do know these variants are more contagious than the original coronavirus vaccine, and the state is keeping an eye on that. And we had a sharp decline, but the new cases have plateaued.
Yeah, these variants, these new strains of COVID-19 are creating a big concern among health officials in the state and state officials like Governor Mike DeWine. And that's why he said that we're hoping, and the state's hoping, that the rate of the vaccine, the rate of the amount of people who go get the vaccine can hopefully outpace the spread of these new variants. Because in the end, and like you said, pointing to the numbers, it does seem to be something that's spreading. And could it be the variants? Could it be maybe people are feeling more relaxed with the restrictions, maybe not wearing their masks as much as the weather's getting better? There's all sorts of factors that could play into this. And so that is the hope, is that more vaccination could help stem this increase of spread.
Morgan Harper, the governor really hasn't made a whole lot of news in the past few weeks on restrictions. He has loosened the attendance at indoor performances and like hockey games and basketball games and outdoor athletic performances when they get going. Are you satisfied that the governor is sort of taking a wait and see attitude now to see how these variants go and see how the vaccine distribution goes before pulling back even more on the public activities and health orders?
I mean, we've definitely learned a lot in terms of how to manage our behavior and stay safe in the midst of the coronavirus, and having more people, especially in vulnerable populations, vaccinated allows for us to have a bit more freedom of movement there. And so, I hope that we continue to see that the governor's striking the right balance. But again, I think the critical piece here is using his platform to push back against some of the misinformation and target the populations that don't want to get vaccinated and also aren't taking, haven't been taking the virus seriously this whole time and are prolonging our ability to move forward.
Mike, now you had mentioned that you haven't been to a restaurant maybe once in the past year, but now you feel comfortable going out, even though restaurants have been open really since last May.
I do. That's not to say we didn't take a lot of carry out. We did, but I always felt uncomfortable. My children didn't want me to go in. My wife and I were at the age where, we're very vulnerable to it. And so I didn't, but I had my second shot about, I think February 9th was the end. My wife's had her too. We still go out, we wear masks and all that sort of thing. But I feel that I can go into places that I'm separated 6 feet and all that. I feel safe about it. I wouldn't go to a bar yet or anything like that and sit at a bar, but I can, have dinner and I feel comfortable. And I'm getting less resistance from my children. And I mean, they were all very, very firm. They would literally call on us, make sure I was home at 8:30 at night. But I feel much better about it now. And I do feel confident in doing some things.
Payback for all those curfews I'm sure you imposed over the years. Anyway, 15 weeks after a sheriff's deputy shot and killed Casey Goodson, we now have the official autopsy report. It came not from the coroner, but from the family of the black man killed by the white deputy. The report shows that Casey Goodson was shot 5 times in the back and once in the buttocks. The official report matches what the family has been saying since December when the shooting occurred. Goodson's family maintains Franklin County Deputy Jason Mead murdered him. The sheriff's office says it is investigating whether using deadly force was necessary. Authorities say Goodson was waving a gun, and a gun was found at the scene. They maintain the location of the gunshot wounds alone does not tell the entire story. Michael Miller, you're a former prosecutor. You've also been on the other side of the rail in defending those accused. Is this autopsy report enough, as the mayor has called, for this case to go to the grand jury?
Oh, I think it's going to go to the grand jury, whether there's an autopsy report or not. The circumstances of the autopsy report, which don't necessarily mean what many conclusions people have drawn. But I think surely it's enough to get it to the grand jury, and I have no doubt that the deputy is probably going to face some sort of a legal proceeding. How it turns out, I don't know. The law is very complicated on this type of thing, but it's absolutely clear now. I don't think anybody can deny it, that this young man was shot 6 times, 5 in the back and 1 in the buttocks. Now, that's a given. Does that transcend automatically to some sort of a verdict of guilty, to some sort of a homicide? It doesn't. There's still facts. I mean, I don't know what the facts are. I don't know what this officer is going to allege. I don't know what kind of a gun he was using. I don't know about this gun was found. I don't know why they went after him in the first place. I don't know any of these things. So there's plenty left, but I think clearly it's enough to take it to the grand jury, and I suspect some sort of action that they will take.
The fact that he was shot 5 times in the back, I mean, police officers will say 1 shot in the back, the person could have just turned and that's why he was shot in the back. The fact that there are 5 shots in the back, does that raise more questions in your mind?
Oh, I think it does, Mike. Now, again, I don't know what kind of a weapon this officer had. If it was a fully automatic, you can pull the trigger and everything comes out. I doubt that that's what he had, but I don't know. But does that, the fact, would he be better off from a defense point of view if there was 1 shot as opposed to 5 or 6? Clearly, I would think the answer to that is yes.
Morgan Harper, reaction in the community. The family, again, continues to call. They say, this is what we told you way back in December. I think they said 3 times at the time, but several times in the back he was shot. And they claim that Casey Goodson was just bringing home sandwiches for his family. What's the feeling among his supporters now on the latest development here?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that this latest information about the autopsy report is just confirming, like you said, things that the family was already saying, that many in the community felt to be true. And so the question now is not just whether it's going to get to the grand jury, but will there actually be an indictment and ultimately a conviction? And I think a real piece of frustration is the level of protection that Jason Meade, this deputy sheriff, is getting that Casey Goodson will never be able to enjoy. And the fact that he's lost a life and Jason Meade has not even had 1 bullet, no harm at all, is completely unacceptable. The community is looking for accountability here and true justice, and that will only come from Jason Meade being held accountable.
Andy Chow, at this point, it's really he said, there's no body camera. Jason Meade, Franklin County deputy, was not wearing a body camera. The Franklin County deputies still don't have them, as far as we know. They're planning to now. And that's what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to witness statements because they're unlike the Andre Hilks case where you saw at least some portion of a body camera. There's no camera here to let us know what really happened.
Yeah, it's going to come down to witness statements. It's going to come down to what evidence is there. And the issue of body cameras is something that's been going on for a while now, not only in Columbus, but all around the state. Do offices of law enforcement have the resources that they need in order to be held accountable? And body cameras are a big part of that. We've seen in cases where even when officers do have body cameras, they don't turn them on. And so what can be done? This is a question that legislators and policymakers are asking themselves right now. What can be done to create more accountability and more transparency among law enforcement offices around the state? Body cameras are a huge part of that. There are plenty of other things as well. More training, better screening when it comes to recruitment of law enforcement officers. This is unfortunately something that is talked about a lot once one of these tragic events happen, once somebody is shot, once a person of color is shot by a police officer, and that discussion happens. There's a lot of talk about it for a little bit, and then it sort of tapers off. So what will legislators do about it? Will they actually continue to talk about this issue even past these specific events?
All right, our next topic, one of the most well-known and possibly one of the most powerful lobbyists in Ohio, died this week while under indictment in the state's largest bribery scandal. Neil Clark was found dead near his Florida home. Authorities call it an apparent suicide. Clark was one of 5 men indicted in the $61 million bribery scheme to raise and funnel money to Larry Householder and lawmakers in order to win passage of a $1 billion bailout of 2 nuclear power plants on Lake Erie. For decades, Clark had a long list of big name and big money clients. He was well known for being aggressive, and he was also known for pushing ethical limits. Andy Chow, he was under indictment, obviously facing a lot of pressure, was Clark, but he also maintained his innocence. Any indication what led up to his death this week?
Well, before we get into that, let's just say this is clearly a tragedy. This is a loss of life. And so before we talk about what was going on with Neil's court cases and everything, I just want to pay respects to the family and still recognize that this is a loss of life. Yes, he was under indictment. He was charged with racketeering. He was charged with playing a big role in this $61 million bribery case. He had a residence in Florida and also lived in Ohio. And there was part of the police report did suggest that Neil may have been talking about being in some sort of financial situation, financial issues. And so, of course, that might be discussed as something that was part of all of this. Neil Clark was a very big, influential lobbyist at the State House. He was one of the most well-known lobbyists walking the hallways. And he didn't even have to walk the hallways. He could just pick up a phone and talk to people because he had that much influence and power at the State House. Of course, recently in those allegations from the federal investigators, it was his potential role, his alleged role in the alleged bribery scheme that got the nuclear power plant bailout passed through the form of HB 6, which was a sweeping energy bill that most people know about. But he was also a lobbyist for the payday lending industry, a lobbyist for the Ohio employee pensions program. So he worked on a lot of big issues and had a major voice on a lot of big pieces of legislation.
Mike Miller, again, we'll tap into your legal expertise here. The case against Neil Clark obviously ends with his death. What does it do? What kind of impact might that have on the overall case? As now, two have pled guilty. Neil Clark is gone, but others still are indicted and have pled not guilty.
Well, I don't think it's going to have a great deal of effect on it, Mike. I'm sure the government has put together cases on all these individuals that they can stand on their own if they have to. There's all kind of, to use conspiracy, you can use hearsay testimony, one person against another. The fact that Mr. Clark is now deceased may or may not have any effect on that. But I'm sure in the long run, this isn't going to happen. These two people who have entered guilty pleas, whether or not they made an agreement with the United States Attorney's Office to testify in the trials of Mr. Clark and Mr. Householder, I don't know. I'm making an assumption they did, but I don't know that. But I think you can rest assured that the federal government is well prepared to move forward in this. And from what former United States Attorney David DeViller said last week, he expects now that COVID's over and the grand jury's meeting, the federal grand jury, that there will be, I think David said something like, other actions taken in this matter. Don't know what that means, whether it's other people, whether it's additional charges and so forth. But I don't think Mr. Clark's death is going to have any effect on any of that.
Morgan Harper, you know, lobbying at the State House is a fact of life. It has been for a long time. But the difference now is there's a lot of money involved. It's expensive to run campaigns. There are term limits. What does the story of Neil Clark and his associates over the years, what does that say to voters of Ohio, and what lessons can be learned there?
Yeah, well, I definitely want to reiterate the condolences to his family, but also, I do think we need to be clear that the legacy here is one of making a career out of buying off our government and our elected officials. And, Andy mentioned a couple of the examples of that other than the HB6 scandal, which is egregious enough, but payday lending that has ravaged Black communities financially in our state and did for a long time. This is a reckoning for all of us about how are we going to get our state legislature and government back on the side of people and not allow large corporations and those that aid them to continue to get rich while the rest of us suffer.
All right. While the case against Clark ends with his death, it continues for the four others under indictment. This week, we learned that federal utility regulators are looking into First Energy's political activities. The Dayton Daily News reported this week that First Energy donated some $1 million to Governor DeWine's affiliated campaigns, and the man at the center of the probe Former House Speaker Larry Householder remains in office as House Republicans have decided, at least for now, not to expel him from the legislature. Morgan Harper, Larry Householder continues to hang over Republican heads. It's the state's largest ever bribery scandal. But Democrats really haven't made that much noise about it. When will they start making a lot of noise about it?
I'm waiting. I agree. I don't think they're making enough noise about it. I think we have Democrats that also took First Energy money, which complicates the messaging around creating such noise. And, again, I think that this is the time for us as people in our state. Are we going to allow our state to continue to be one of the most corrupt states in the country? Are we all going to stand up and demand more from our representatives and bring that accountability? So I think this at this point is beyond partisan or party. It's really about how we make our state work for regular people.
Mike Miller, when a lawmaker is indicted in a $61 million bribery scheme, usually they resign, but Larry Householder maintains his innocence, and he is innocent until proven guilty. That's no given. Are you surprised that he's still in the House and they haven't taken a vote to expel him?
Well, I suppose it always depends, Mike, on whose ox is gored. Am I surprised? Yes, but not to a great degree. I mean, there are people who do not want him to go, and their reason is, look, he may be a bad guy, but we believe in the law that should be that justice goes to everybody and that you are presumed innocent till you're proven guilty. This isn't a rush to judgment. Just let's convict everybody, not give them due process. Just that's what we need to do. They don't want to do that. Then they also think, how about this? Aren't we disenfranchising lots of voters who voted for him, knowing full well that he had been indicted and charged? So I can't argue with some of those reasons. If I were there, I might overrule that and go another way. But there are reasonable reasons that people have chosen not to do this. And we'll wait and see. And as Morgan said, there are Democrats that took money too. Simply because people take money, that doesn't mean that they're corrupt. And I disagree with Morgan saying this is the most corruptible state in the union or whatever. We got one guy who's charged, and the government has spent tons and tons and tons of money, and they came up with Larry Householder from an elected position. So I just want to give people, whether it's the deputy that shot Miss Goodson, whether it's Larry Householder or whatever, what we've done with people all over the country my entire life. They are innocent until proven guilty, and let's see what happens in a court of law. Then we can either applaud or complain about what the verdict ultimately is.
Andy Chow, real quickly, Bob Cupp, Democrats would vote to expel Householder, so he would have the votes if he got even a minimal number of Republicans. I take it he's the one who put that out for and make his members choose, his caucus members choose.
Yeah. I think it's pretty clear that if he were to allow it on the House floor, that he would have enough votes, or there would be enough votes to expel Larry Householder. But House Speaker Bob Cupp is too scared to do that at this point because he doesn't have a large consensus of his House Majority Caucus behind him. He still has what would probably be a minority of the Republican caucus disagreeing with a vote to expel. And I think that seems to be enough to discourage him from putting it on the floor at this point.
Yeah, and Cupp has asked that Householder resign. Anyway, let's get to our off-the-record final parting shots. Mike Miller, we'll start with you.
Well, my final thought, I suppose, is I'm so pleased the way the vaccine is moving. And I'm so pleased, as Morgan said, that the people of color now seem to be taking this. If we can get some of these people, the militia-type people, to get them to take it, maybe we can have this herd immunity, which all of us need. And I'm hopeful that that's getting there.
Morgan Harper.
Yeah, just coming back to one of the things we were talking about in terms of innocent until proven guilty, that has not been the experience of everyone in this country. That certainly has not been the experience of a lot of Black people in this country. And let's take the example of someone who was not accused of any crime. Casey Goodson Jr. lost his life, no crime involved. And so we need to be really cognizant right now about the differences in treatment and hold those who have been committing crimes accountable.
And Andy Chow, your final thought.
Yeah, the Atlanta shooting spree that left 8 people dead, including 6 Asian women, is bringing new light to an Ohio issue where a bipartisan bill in the Senate to create the Asian American Pacific Islander Affairs Commission and the state office would help generate more awareness about issues that Asian Americans in Ohio face every year. So there's more of a push in the state house to get that passed.
My final thought, there was a lot of speculation that a judge named French would be named to be the chairperson of the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, but it's not the former Supreme Court Justice. It's Franklin County Judge Jennifer French. She was named by Governor DeWine on Friday. No clear ties to the energy industry, but she knows a little bit about energy policy, so we'll see how that works out for the state's top agency to regulate our electric system and natural gas system. That'll do it for this week. Check us out online, Facebook and Twitter, and WOSU.org, where you can relive this experience or watch us on demand whenever you want. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.